Yo, 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 welcome back to the Further Your Lifestyle podcast, conversations on lifestyle, passions, and hustles. My name's Chris Furlong, I am your host, and today I am absolutely thrilled and honored to be able to introduce you to Emily, aka M the Yogi. She's an inspiring and beautiful young lady, a spirited traveler, honestly, and she's full of freedom, and she goes by the name of M the Yogi simply because she does exactly that. She travels around, or she has been traveling around the world, location independent, and primarily using her skills in yoga to teach yoga and to make a living. Of course, that's not everything that she has done. She's got a story of her own and how she got here and why she's doing this. But also we talk about being centered and challenging yourself to grow, and also challenging the norm and creating a lifestyle that can be of freedom and of your own choosing. And we talk about how that can be different for everyone and how that obviously has different perspectives, but we walk through a few of the different things that she did in order to make this lifestyle possible for herself. We also talk about some of her passions and some of the things she likes to do in her free time. Of course, with COVID that has just happened in the last year at the time of this podcast, obviously being location independent or being someone that loves to travel, it does bring some big challenges. So we also dive into that and talk about just her and everything that she's about. So grab a cup of tea, a coffee, or get comfortable however you like to listen. And of course, we do have this on the YouTube, we're on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcasts too. However you want to enjoy this, get ready because it is an absolute epic of an episode. Let's get into it. Hello, Emily. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to finally have you as a guest. And I know, we've had so many chats over the last year, actually. And how are you today?
I am well. It is nighttime for me, so I'm winding down. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's kind of cool, and well, it was sunny a few days ago here in Melbourne, Australia. And so where are you based at the moment?
I'm based in Massachusetts right now.
Okay.
So the northeast of the US.
So you're leading into your summer, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is spring here.
Oh, nice. Oh yeah. Okay.
Getting a little warmer.
Yeah, but I feel like the warmer that conversation between Australia and America is always a bit, because our warm is completely different. But anyway, that's
Right.
that's a different conversation. So actually, last time I saw you was it was summer in Australia, Melbourne, and that was back in January 2020, which is a blur. There's been a lot of things that have happened since then. And I think prior to that, you had just kind of done some hopping from Bali. You had come back from a trip to China, and before that, you were in New Zealand. You had been traveling around doing so much, and that's why I think you're such a perfect candidate for this podcast because of your lifestyle and the different things that you do. But let's take a step back and let's hear a bit about yourself and your background and kind of the journey of just building who you are, and then we can probably dive into a bit more around that I guess the spirited traveler that you are.
Okay. I'll try to make it brief. So I grew up in New England in the US, had never really traveled out of the country. I went to school down south in North Carolina, and that was kind of my big travel experience. And that is where I decided I wanted to travel internationally. And once I kind of dipped my foot into that, I was like, I can't stop. And I majored in accounting, and I had traveled prior to finishing my studies and also started my yoga practice at the time. And I'm like, wow, I don't want to work in corporate America and work all the time until I die. Like, I'm all set with that. So I decided to kind of do whatever I wanted to after graduation, which has had its ups and downs, as we've talked about. But it's amazing. I make my own schedule pretty much. I can go on a vacation that's longer than 5 days out of the year. And it's great. I'm very happy with it. I wouldn't have changed anything.
That's a great way to summarize it. And I think that's something that's always, I think even when I originally first stumbled across, I think it was your Instagram. I can't even remember how I found you, but I think it was because I had posted something related to yoga, and you came up in one of the hashtags or something, and you were in New Zealand at the time, and it was like some amazing picture in some waterfront where you were just coming out of a class and you had finished teaching. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then I remember reaching out and having a chat to you just via Instagram and learning about, oh, that you just travel and this is how you've been, making a living and doing all these amazing and wonderful things, and, not being location bound and location independent. And that in itself was just like, okay, this is super cool, because it's everything which I think people should be able to know about more and do more, because especially in this day and age, obviously at the moment, there's a bit of a different idea around traveling like that. But at the time of when we were discussing about it, I think, that's what really stood out to me was, because like what you were doing is exactly where I think people find it as a bit of a cliche, or kind of like, oh, it's just that Instagram highlight reel, when the reality was that that wasn't true. It was, it wasn't just a highlight reel. It was the full shebang and 100% legit. So, that's what intrigues me so much. And on that, you've mentioned that, you had a background of accounting, and, you didn't want to get into that corporate lifestyle. I guess just to jump into that a little bit. So yeah, okay, you studied accounting, and at what point did you realize that that wasn't for you, or, getting into the corporate world and thinking, well, actually, no, I can't do this? Like what drove you to make that change, or what kind of triggered you to really realize that?
I think the reason why I kind of went down, the whole path of going to a 4-year university and getting a degree is because, at least in the US, I don't know if it's as stressed in Australia, but like, that's the thing. Like, I remember being 5 years old in kindergarten and they made you draw and write down the profession that you wanted when you're 5. Like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life when you're 5? It's bad enough that they ask 17-year-olds, but I'm like, I can't even spell strawberry. And I just, thought like my parents always said, go to school. I'm like, okay, we'll go to school. I got good grades, go to school, get a job. And it wasn't until I started traveling, and a couple of places I went to when I first started, Puerto Rico, I went to Ecuador, and then I studied abroad in Europe. And I met people that maybe took a gap year. They were on their gap year. Maybe they didn't go to college. Maybe they dropped out. Maybe they did. And now they're doing something, completely different. You'll meet yogis all the time that are like, I used to be this like crazy lawyer, and now I just teach yoga on Saturdays. Like, people that have, kind of come back to themselves, like after however many years. And I'm like, wow, these people are enjoying their lives. They're traveling. And they didn't take the traditional, route of going to school and getting a job and staying in that job forever. Because I have friends that are in those jobs, and they talk about how they get their 3 weeks of PTO, which is, inclusive of Christmas and New Year's, and then they maybe can go to Greece for 5 days.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't want that. I don't care how much money you give me. I don't want that. That sounds awful.
Yeah, so the typical rat race, I guess, you mentioned there, that's how you grew up. And I think that's very much the same in our culture here in Australia as well. It's kind of like, you're going through, primary school, high school, and, you kind of get like I remember having like a career advisor and saying, when you're going to go to apply for a college or university, it's like you need to pick 5 in case you don't get your first preference. And then if you don't get your second, it's like, but I don't want to do that 5th one. Like I'm interested in one, whether I want to do that, I don't really know. But I remember them kind of, saying, well, like, what if that doesn't work out? What are you going to do? And really drilling that into you. And it's now that I, look back in hindsight, I can think back, it's quite stressful, right? Because you're trying to make a decision that you feel like is going to dictate the rest of your life. And it's very overwhelming. And what you've just said, that, you got the good grades, so you kind of just went into where it made sense, or where maybe you had somewhat of an interest. But so to play it back, so you're saying that basically once you started to see what others were doing, or maybe seeing some of the inspiration or influence of not being so bound to that normal, that's what kind of triggered you to maybe make that additional decision. And then after a taste of the travel lifestyle, it was kind of downhill from there, was it?
Yeah, because I got to experience both. Like, I got to have that semester abroad where I was in Prague for 5 months, and I hopped around Europe to I don't know how many countries. And then I immediately came back and worked at a public accounting firm for 8 weeks in Washington, D.C. And it was full on tax accounting, and I met really amazing people. The company was great, but I was like, why am I doing this? I'm like, I feel like a robot could do this. This is nothing special. This is just, for me to get to from point A to point B, which is what a lot of my friends are doing. They're like, oh, I'm just gonna do this job for 3 years and then I can get to where I need to be. I'm like, committing to 3 years of something is a long time. Like, that's a long time to settle for something. But
Yeah.
it's so normal. It's very normalized here.
Well, yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's probably part of the problem is because you don't know anything different, it doesn't seem like a big issue. Like when you say 3 years, like, I mean, think about it, 3 years really over a span of 60 years or a 40-year working career isn't really a long time. So in someone's mindset, it's like, oh yeah, I'll just do hard work for 3 years and then I can just chill for the, the remainder 37. But obviously it's not that easy. And I think you don't really realize that until you get into that, I guess, rat race or into that routine and cycle. And then you start to realize, okay, no, it's, I'm not going to have all the money I thought I would, or I thought I was going to have this dream achieved by here, and it doesn't go to that plan. And then you get comfortable and then it's easier to just keep doing it. I can completely relate to that and understand that completely. So, okay. Yeah. And I think this is very important for people listening is because you've realized this a lot earlier than a lot of other people, right? You kind of, as you said, you were away, international. And then when you came back and you just worked and what you said, it was 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And you kind of was like, what the heck am I doing? Whereas, which is good. It's that it means that you knew as soon as possible what you wanted. And you didn't make that compromise of like, okay, let's just hash it out for 3-4 years, get some money, and then I'll go try something. So with that in mind then, so okay, you realize that wasn't for you, so what did you do? Like, what happens from there?
So a couple examples that I have for you, and other people's experiences that I've seen of these travelers. They were like, those lawyers that up and quit and decided they were going to teach English in Prague or whatever. Like they worked hard and they were like, I hate this life. Why am I doing it? And now they're 50, 60 years old living in a foreign country, right? Or I meet someone who worked in a job or 2 years or something and they realized it was awful and they quit. Or I have a friend who was supposed to do what I did, but instead he wanted to work and make money. And then he was going to go to Australia. And I think what kind of clicked with me right before I left for New Zealand, right before I decided to book my ticket, is he messaged me and he was like, listen, you should go now because I was supposed to go. And then I got a promotion, then another promotion. And now I'm 28 years old and I've never been to Australia. I get to go to Croatia for a week out of the year and that's it. And I was like, wow. So I was like, this would be the best time for me. And something that people will say, and it's true, office jobs are always there. For me, it's not just like, okay, accounting is my only fallback plan. Like I've worked in restaurants, I've worked in bars. It's super easy to make, a few bucks just waiting tables or whatever. So I know that I could do that literally anywhere without having done it for a couple of years and just like, well, I have this background, hire me, I need some money. So I'm like, okay, I have other ways of supporting myself if this whole traveling thing doesn't work out. And then I think another big thing for me is I do have a really strong support system and I do have a family back here. So worst case scenario, I knew in my head, okay, if I go to Australia or New Zealand and it doesn't work out, I can always come home.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense, right? And I think, you said it really well with your friend saying that, he wanted to do this and he got the promotion, he got comfortable, and then he's realized, okay, it's not going to happen. Or look, not saying that it would never ever happen, but you get into that rat race, or you end up buying a house, or you get a mortgage, or life happens, right? Whereas I think that's really good that you took that leap because, well, one, it really does encourage others, and it's inspirational to hear and see. Because now that I've been following you doing this, I think I was following you probably a good 6 months before we actually met in January 2020. It might have been even a bit more than that, but I think you had just come into New Zealand, and that's where you were teaching the yoga. So seeing all that, and then I've been able to see that progression since. It's just like, well, everything you're saying just makes so much sense, because, well, you've continued to go around. You went to China, you went back to US, and you've been in Australia, and you did that. I remember you did that kind of just, I think it was only like a 4-day trip to Bali or something, just because the tickets were cheap, right? And but that just demonstrates the kind of flexibility and lifestyle in terms that you've created, because I think one of the areas where this gets a little concerning, or where people maybe get a bit fearful, is like, well, how do you make money? Like, how do you pay for this, right? How do you have that security? And I think one area that helps with that jump is, you mentioned that you have the support from your family, just in terms of, yes, go do this, we're supporting you. But when it comes to, you mentioned around, you thought about some of the things that you can do anyway, because yes, you can get a corporate job anyway, you can get a job regardless, you've got that now under your belt, so there's always that plan B. But knowing that you can do go work in a restaurant somewhere, wherever you travel, where it is Bali, China, US, Australia, New Zealand, and any other place, but also with the yoga as well, right? And I think going hand in hand with that, one thing which I think would be very good for people to understand, because I think that's what will stop a lot of people, is like, how do I make money? Now, yeah, you've said about restaurants and things like that. So is there a way that you can kind of explain on, okay, so maybe you go somewhere for 4 weeks. Are you just going to teach yoga? Do you plan that in advance, or do you kind of just, figure it? I know you are very much on the flow and kind of just easy going, but how does someone even start to do this? I mean, how does someone go somewhere, find a way to make some money, and then just, unless, because unless you're looking at a bank account with that, maybe you've got $30,000 there, feeling like, okay, I'm safe, I'm secure. But if you don't have that, knowing that you're just kind of jumping around, oh, I need a bit more money here, a bit more money there, what is that like? How do you go around? Because it's scary, right? It's scary.
It is, because there have been times where I have had no money and I have lived off my credit cards, which is not good. I do not recommend. But going back to me being an accounting major, it's not just everything I learned in school with debits and credits, but my dad is a finance guy, and ever since I was a kid, my parents taught me and my little sister, really good money management. They provided for us as we were kids, but like as we got older, if I wanted a random sweater, they weren't just like, well, we'll buy it for you, unless I needed it for school or something. They're like, oh, well, you're going to pay for that with the money that you make from your allowance that you get once a week for doing the dishes and doing all these other things, like little jobs, before I turned 15. So something that I wanted to say with that is, it's not just, okay, how do you make money? Because I have so many people that ask me that question, and I don't think that's the most important question. I think the more important question is, how do you budget your money?
Nice.
Because you could be making $100,000 a year, I could be making 60, but you're blowing it on a really nice car, really expensive apartment in the city that you have to yourself, gym memberships, random subscriptions that you don't need, coffee every day, really expensive restaurants. Like, I have friends that live in the city, they're paying almost $2,000 a month in rent, and they're going out on the weekends and they're spending almost $1,000 a week just from eating and drinking. I'm like, if you didn't spend that money, how much more money would you have to put towards traveling? Because traveling, really, depending on how you travel, can be cheap. A lot of the places that I go to aren't just because I wake up one day and decide I want to go to Greece. It's like, oh, well, let me look on Skyscanner and find the cheapest flights. So I find cheap flights. I don't care where I sit. I'll sit in economy. I'll pay the cheapest price, try to pack light. You're not paying for baggage, just like random traveling, things like that. Stay in a hostel, split costs with people. You don't have to travel expensive. And it's not like I'm paying a rent anywhere. I'm traveling around. It'd be different if I was traveling and I was paying my Brooklyn apartment rent every month. But because I'm not, it's like, okay, sometimes I'm staying in places that cost me less than if I was staying in the US.
Yeah, look, I think that's great, and it really is that mentality switch, right? Because and I don't know if you've read the 4 Hour Work Week, but Tim Ferriss talks about this a lot. It's like the new rich and how they live, and creating that lifestyle of flexibility. Because how you explained it, yes, someone could be earning 100,000 and you could be earning 60, but you've got more time and you actually have more money because you're not spending as much, you're saving it, or you're letting your money work for you, or how you go about as you said, when you fly, and how you live, right? So I think that's a very key thing, and it's great to hear it from someone that's doing it, because a lot of the time you hear and read these things, but you don't necessarily see it in action. And I know when I saw it, I'm like, okay, you're definitely being able to do this full time and manage without any problems, because as I mentioned, you've been able to travel around, bounce around, hop to Bali, whatever, and you can do that with ease, or you make it look easy anyway. But I know also, in the past, you've shared some of, your different tips and tricks, or, how to leverage potentially, your credit card points to get those, those savings and things like that. And that's, once again, using your money smartly, and not having to work necessarily extra hard, right? Because coming back to the original point, yeah, we can go work 3 years, get lots of money, then go away for, maybe 4 or 5 weeks or something, but then you have to go back, and you've created it the other way. Whereas you're going on the flow, and you're able to just live how you please, because you're not spending such, living such a lavish lifestyle. However, I think your lifestyle looks very lavish. Like, it does not look boring. It doesn't look like there's nothing happening or anything like that. So kudos to you. So I guess maybe one question with that then, how you're budgeting, and, you obviously having those different expenses while traveling. So are you able to save though? I think that could be a very good question for people to hear or understand. Or maybe it's not saving, but do you have enough money maybe to invest? Is that something that you can accommodate, or is it still a bit of a struggle?
So when I first got out of school, my initial reaction was just like, I want to just make enough money to travel and do the things that I want to do. So I wasn't worried about having extra money or emergency money, which I probably should have been. I know I needed in New Zealand and Australia at least 3 or 5,000 US dollars in my bank account to go. And I had that, but like just barely, and it's funny because the most I've ever saved is this past year, being, in the middle of COVID, because I can't do anything. So I have saved a lot this year, and I'm like, okay, am I going to put all this money into an investment, or am I just going to use it in travel? And I do have some money in stocks. I don't have a ton, but I do have it there because I'm just like, why not? But investments are a whole other topic, and I have friends that can talk about them way better than I can. So
Yeah. No, I think it's just as something to be able to share to the listeners, is because it's probably one of those, you answered it quite well, that you had a certain amount of money when you came to Australia, and obviously you've saved a lot more during COVID, but it sounds like it's never really been that priority for you, and you are living the lifestyle of how you choose. So, because at the end of the day, if you have savings just for the sake of savings, if it's not invested and it's just sitting there, and you're not necessarily doing any, what difference does it really make? I mean, it's just a number. Okay, my net worth is this, or this is how much I'm worth on paper. But at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything, right? So I think you having maybe, let's say you had $5,000, but you're traveling across 3 different countries, and, living, enjoying, and, going out and having fun. Well, that makes you look like you do have $100,000, because people with $100,000 struggle to do it, right? So it really is a mentality, and it is that whole lifestyle, right? And that's why it intrigues so much. So with that, then, you mentioned that obviously, yep, being 2020, COVID came, and it's it's the elephant in the room when it comes to someone that's a spiritual traveler, and someone that's not necessarily
can I
location
interrupt you
dependent.
with a quote?
Yeah.
So one of my favorite quotes is, "Your money will return, your time won't." And that's kind of like my big travel motto.
It's so good, and so true. It's people, you need to pay more attention to her, because she's very smart and wise.
Well, I just have so many friends saving up for a trip that they're going to take when they're 65. And I'm like, have you been to Dubrovnik, Croatia? Because I was there when I was like 21, and walking up along the steps, like where King's Landing from Game of Thrones is filmed, those steps, it's like a mile-long walk. I was like out of breath, and I'm relatively in shape, and I was 21. I'm like, you don't want to do this when you're 60. Like, why are you waiting until then?
But it's a good point, right? And I think that's why the conversation is so important, because you don't get taught it. You only get told it in listening to a podcast or on YouTube, and it's not voiced enough, right? Because a lot of the time it's like, yeah, I can do that later, or people are too scared to think about it, or it's not a reality for them. So how can they even fathom that, right? I use this analogy all the time. It's like when I was training for my first marathon, or when I first started running, for me to do a marathon, I can't even fathom it. It's like, how is that even possible? But then once I started to go through the motions, started living the lifestyle to run a marathon, I'm like, okay, I can do this. Then once you've done it and you're living that life, you're like, okay, well, I could go do another one. It's the same with how you're living. Is once you took the jump and you got into it, yeah, there's a few bumps and things along the way, but now now you know what works, what doesn't. You continue to grow in that area, and because you have that mindset, you find it hard to really, I guess, fathom the other lifestyle of the 9 to 5, because like it doesn't make sense. Okay.
Well, it's kind of like that cliche quote of you can do anything you set your mind to. Like I never ran a marathon. I only did a half, but when I was running, in grade school, our coaches were very big on running is, mental, and the same thing with yoga. And two, I have my ups and downs and my crazy nomadic life, but my normal friends that work a 9 to 5 have their ups and downs too. And I feel like, I throw myself into the deep end. It's like jumping into the deep end without floaties, versus they're kind of waiting in the kiddie pool and for a big wave to come up and splash them. But like, I'm ready for it. I don't know when it's going to hit, but I know it's coming because I know I'm doing crazy things. But they're kind of, in the same space that they have been for the past 5 years. And then when something like that happens to them, it's very overwhelming and it's very, very scary. And I don't know if it occurs more frequently for me or for someone who works and lives a normal, quote unquote, normal lifestyle. But I feel like, I don't know if I want to say I'm a little more prepared for it because I expect it to happen. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And before I even jump onto around the whole COVID thing and traveling, is I think we actually chatted about this a bit when I last saw you back in January last year, and about being centered, right? And you kind of touched on around it's the mentality, and how you continue to, I guess, stay centered but go with the flow at the same time. And I know you related that back to how you do your yoga, because it's not just yoga isn't just an exercise, and there was so much more to that. And I think what you alluded to there is like, you're living in a way where, yeah, you have that flexibility and you're able to adapt, or you can expect things to happen, but you're prepared for it because you're used to being able to move around, and you're not having to, I guess, because of the way you live, you're being able to just adapt easily and go with it. Whereas usually a lot of the people, if something happens, it's dramatic. That's all we're invested in. That's, it's a big, like when someone has a 9 to 5 gig, and last year, a lot of people lost their jobs, and all of a sudden it's like, crap, this wasn't part of the plan. I was meant to be safe. I was meant to be secure. And they realized that everything that they had, put their life and, blood, sweat and tears into was kind of just gone. Whereas for yourself, the only person you're really invested in is yourself, right? And if something changes, you can kind of just, go with the flow, go around it and adjust accordingly. No big hiccup for you. Of course, I'm not saying it's easy, and, there's obviously mental and emotional sides to things, but you have that, I guess, luxury or flexibility to be able to do that. And no, I think maybe, do you want to touch on that a bit of how, whether it is yoga or, staying centered and going with the flow, how that has really, I guess, helped you, or maybe has it helped other people?
So I guess before I started yoga, before I started traveling, I was very, I'm going to use this word, uptight. I was very set on, like, I had my schedule for school, like the classes I was going to take on an Excel spreadsheet. I had everything planned out. I was like, okay, here's my 4-year plan. Here's what I'm going to do. Because that's all I knew. Like, I didn't know that it was okay to not have a plan, that it was okay to, not know what you were going to do in the next 6 months. And I remember that really stressed me out, all of that pressure of kind of like you were saying, okay, well, I applied to 3 colleges. Well, you need to apply to more just in case. Like, what do you mean? And just, I feel like I was always, stressed and running around like a chicken with my head cut off. And I traveled and I found yoga, and my friends that have known me, for this amount of time, they'll say the same thing. They just think it's so funny that I'm all like, ooh, woo now, because before I was like awful. And it's not that I don't still have stress and anxiety in my life from things that I need to do, or especially if I'm making plans with someone and I'm late and I'm dealing with someone else's time, because I like to respect their time, especially because I'm like la-di-da all the time, like, oh crap, other people have schedules. Um, I just have been able to deal with it better through yoga and traveling, and not just, you know, hopping on a plane and meeting some people in a foreign country and eating different food and, you know, doing warrior two every day. It's kind of having these experiences, being put into difficult situations where you may not know anyone or may not be able to speak the language, or uncomfortable positions with your body and like struggling to achieve something. Like, as I'm sure you've gotten with running, you learn more about yourself. You know, you have a lot of self-awareness, and that I think is what brings you to being grounded, because at the end of the day, no matter how bad the day is, I'll try to remind myself, and maybe I'll journal and write down like things that I love about myself or things that I've accomplished today, just small things like, oh, I did a load of laundry today, or oh, I cleaned up my room, just very small tasks that I've accomplished, a little like added bit of positivity. So stuff
Yeah,
like that.
no, that's really good, and I can resonate with that because I feel like, yeah, in the world that we live, everything's so hyped and oversaturated of like, oh, you need to do this or you need to do that, and like, I mean, yes, hustling it's a, you can look at it in so many different ways, whether you're hustling for yourself or you're doing the 9 to 5 hustle, to try and make a living. But I think there is that overwhelming of like, oh, what did you do today, or what did you achieve? And you said it so well that you, at the end of the day, you've kind of reflected like, oh well, I did the washing, I did this, and those things, I mean, they're all part of life, and sometimes they're not things that we should be stressing about, but that's the reality of, well, today you need to do those things. And just because you spent a day doing those admin things or life things or adulting or whatever, that's required, it's expected, and you should not feel bad that you have those days. It's the same for the days where you have a lazy day where you're resting because, well, your body needs rest, right? It's kind of like, if I know some people have their perspectives of how you're running, you're doing this, or I know people have that idea around, oh, yoga, is it even exercise? But it's so much more than it. And people might think, oh, it's a bit of a time waster. It's like with my running as well. And I don't go to the gym, right? And that's, for me, I don't see that as how I want to grow, but how I am able to find where I feel best or feel productive or feel grounded is through the running as well. So I can really appreciate what you've said there, especially about those kind of reflecting on those smaller things, because progress is progress, whether it's big or small. So no, that's really good. Okay, that's, I mean, there's, I think we could probably talk so much about that, and being mindful of time, and for those listening as well. So I want to kind of repackage how I alluded to before around, yeah, you're traveling, and obviously COVID hit. So if we spin that with, how has that impacted you? And I guess now maybe what's your focus on at the moment? Because things are still, kind of stuck down, and you're not necessarily be able to just do a spontaneous trip to Australia and things like that. So how did that impact you, and how did you kind of navigate through it? And then maybe we'll touch on, what are you focusing on? What's next? Where and all that jazz.
Okay, so at first, I remember I was in Las Vegas and I was there for a couple weeks, and I was going to wait it out, because we thought it was going to be over in 2 weeks. We thought we were coming out of lockdown in 2 weeks, and I was going to go visit my friend in Montana. I'm like, I'll just go visit her for like a weekend. And I brought a backpack full of maybe like 2 pairs of yoga pants and a couple of t-shirts, and that's it. Because I thought we were only going for a little bit, and I ended up staying there for a month, and I was like, oh my God, I have nothing. I wore her clothes, so it was fine. But I just was not expecting it to be like this. And, I was waiting it out, and I was like, this is not going away. And I can say, I remember at the beginning, I would have people message me, or people complain that they were bored because they were alone. And I'm very lucky to say that I was staying between friends and family, so I was never alone. But even then, I'm so used to traveling alone that I was never bored. And it just, because I enjoy my own company, like as much of an extrovert I can be sometimes, I like to, there are so many things I can do by myself in a day that it was totally fine. And that's something I learned about myself that I was like kind of proud of, that I'm like, I'm glad that I've gotten myself to this point where I can be comfortable within my own space for a long period of time. So it doesn't mean that it was easy. Of course, I would have loved to be traveling around, but something I've also learned from all of my crazy experiences is you can only control so much, which is very little. Like I can't control that COVID is happening. I can't control that I can't leave the country. So why am I going to just sit in bed all day and be sad about it? I'm like, okay, what can I do? Oh, I can practice yoga more. I can watch random things on Netflix. I can connect with some friends I haven't connected with in a while. I can cook more. There are just things that I found myself doing that it wasn't, my 2020 goal to be doing all of these things, but I, made use of my time, and I do feel like I've had a productive year, not like I would have ever predicted this year to turn out the way that it did, but you can never really predict the future. So
Yeah, and that's great saying that, yeah, being able to, work with yourself, and because you're used to traveling alone, that's obviously an advantage for yourself. But you said that even though you're usually traveling and, doing all those things by yourself, you had to adapt, you had to pivot and change off what you were doing with your time. And to hear that, you were growing in other areas, just goes to show that, and you said, well, we can't really control anything that's out of our control. So what's the point of trying to put our time and energy there? You may as focus on things that you can do. And, whether it's learning a new skill or practicing a new language, or, as you said, cooking and things like that. So I think it really does come down to that perspective. And because when it comes to this, well, COVID and those situations or things that are out of our control, I mean, you can complain about it, but it's not going to make any difference, right? And so, but what can you do? And I think, that's something that's very encouraging. And I know it's easier said than done. And for those that are listening, I don't want to just say, oh, we should all just, be able to jump up and do what you wanted to be able to do or learn a new skill. But I think there comes that level of, you have to set that balance, right? And actually have that willpower and action, because if you don't take action to even discover or want to pivot, and just, if you're just going to sook and complain, well, of course, nothing will change. So I think, hearing that from you as well, once again, coming back to those simpler things, because people are like, oh, what, you were just cooking? But I mean, there's a lot of people that don't cook. I mean, I'll be the first to say I'm not the one that's out there cooking or know how to cook very well and think, I mean, I can cook to survive, but I think it's one of those things that you wouldn't have been able to have that, I guess, a chance to learn those new things or learn a bit more about yoga or whatever you've done in that period. You could have just, stuck at home or at your friend's place and just sat around and watching Netflix the whole time, which maybe that's not the end of the world either. But my point is that, we do have things that we can control, and there's no point trying to, worry about the things that we can't, because you literally cannot.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing too that was a big wake-up call for me, being a nomad, and I'm sure other people that may be listening to this that are also very big into traveling, realize that they had to, come back to a more centered place, like be more grounded. That was kind of one of my biggest things, because I've heard people label nomads as people that are escaping from things, like escaping from one place to the other, like, oh, I don't want to deal with this ex-boyfriend or that old job, I'm just going to get up and leave, which is very convenient to be able to just get up and leave whenever you want, right? But then it's like, okay, are you really facing your problems if you are running from problems? And I couldn't just get up and leave COVID. So
That's right. So like the only way through it is through it, like everyone else. But I feel like, I mean, it's been definitely a challenge for everyone in so many different ways. But to how we reacted, it's really brought out the truth and realities of people, because people that looked like they had everything together, maybe they've lost their job and things have been thrown upside down. And the ones that maybe didn't have it together, they've realized this is my chance to take action on those things that I haven't done or put aside, or, oh, I've got time to do this now. And it really has kind of just, thrown everything up in the air a little bit, and not obviously to say that it was a good thing, but there is some positives from around it, because we needed that mind switch, that force, to be able to, and, some of it, like yourself, you've already had that flexibility, but even while living that lifestyle, you're still being able to then realize, oh, I haven't been doing this, or I hadn't had time for that. And you've got to know yourself even more. And I think you said it really well, as like, the things that we can't control, like, it's like, well, you can't control them. So I know it's so cliche, but it's also just the reality of it. Like it's simple.
Well, it's really cool. And I'm super inspired by a lot of my friends or just people that I have talked to, in online communities. It's not just because before I felt like I was the one inspiring people. I would always get messages from my friends that are working like, oh my God, I wish I was traveling. That's so cool. I'm so jealous of your life. Um, and now I'm finding all of my friends coming out of the woodworks, making big job changes. Like I've had friends move in the middle of a pandemic and they're just like, you know what? I realize that I'm not happy in this position. And, I have the flexibility now with my online remote job that I can do whatever. And it's cool because I'm seeing more people, maybe not travel as much as I did, but make these changes because they're taking care of themselves first versus, bigger picture societal norms. And they're also taking up things like, some people decided they were going to be content creators or you started a podcast, like other people are, starting whatever, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. And it's like really cool. It's awesome that people are not just sitting there sulking and watching every single movie there is on Netflix. I mean, I did that for the first month, but after that, I I started doing things. So
we all deserved that though. No, that you're so right, and I think it's been great to be able to see people start to take that action and use that at their advantage and make those changes. So let's quickly touch on so okay, yep, you've gone through COVID, you've adjusted, you've pivoted, all that jazz. So what's next? Do you have, I know you're not one for goals or anything like that necessarily in deep plans, but do you have a focus area? Do you have an intention for the year, or is it as simple as maybe it's like you're only looking 2 weeks ahead? And what's next for you? What are you planning to do?
So I just started teaching yoga again for the first time in a while since I was in New Zealand at this studio, and everyone's super great. I don't teach too much right now, which is perfect because I never want to overdo it and have it become something that's not my passion anymore. Uh, and I'm starting another job soon. I have orientation this week. I'm going on a trip to Philadelphia this weekend. So I've been visiting. I know the US is really big, but for me it feels small because I don't need to fly. I could technically drive places to visit friends. So since I've been, gone the whole time and it's been COVID and everyone's been very conscious, but now that we're all getting vaccinated, it's like, okay, I can visit people that I haven't seen since college, almost 3 years ago, which is pretty cool. So I'm enjoying my time being back here and spending more time with family and friends that I haven't seen. And I am working on getting my TEFL certification so I could teach English as a foreign language in another country. So that's an option to open more doors in case that's my only way in to get into another country. But other than that, just hopping around here. I have a couple of ideas on places I want to go, but I could talk about that forever because my ideas wander off. It's more like you'll see a story on my Instagram tomorrow of me flying to Japan or something. That's when you'll know. So
Yep, no, I understand that, and that's, I've always seen you do that as well. But no, I think that's really good, and you've answered it just how I thought you would around, you're kind of pretty cruisy, but you're using the time of how you best can, and just going with the flow and whatnot, and about the whole, teaching English and for what is it? It's TEFL, is it?
yeah, I think it's stands for, I gotta look this up. I
Yeah,
haven't
well,
really done a
so
lot on
teaching
it.
English
Teaching
basically
English.
as in a foreign location, right? And
Mhm.
I think that's really good because obviously you're not just doing that so you can just go to another place, but at the same time it's a byproduct. It's a smart way to think about it in the long term, that if you want to get out traveling and they're not letting people in unless you're working, well, hey, it's a win-win for you. You're going to earn some money, you're going to be able to help other people, and you'll get to have
Yeah.
that traveling lifestyle again. So once again, that mentality of how you're able to adapt and leverage those skills and ability, because a lot of us, we think, oh, well, we can't go there, so we won't go because we're tied up or whatever. But that you've summarized it so well, and I, kudos for that, because I think it's really smart.
I
um,
think a lot of people have this idea, and I've said this to friends before, and maybe it's just because I've worked like 40,000 different types of jobs. It's not just, okay, I've done corporate like in kind of basic bookkeeping and stuff, but I've worked in restaurants, I've worked in bars, I was a live-in nanny, I've done plenty of babysitting, I've done dog walking and cat sitting. Like you can make money that way, just like random odd jobs, right? And not that I want to be a professional dog walker the rest of my life or a professional nanny the rest of my life or server, but it's just, you know, a means to an end. So I think a lot of people have this idea of their dream job and they think I need to do all of these steps to get to my dream job. And I'm like, well, have you considered this? And I'm like, no, that's not one of the steps, right? Like when I majored in accounting, they told us maybe five different types of jobs we could have with our degree. But there are actually so many different types of jobs. Like if you're an accounting major and you love music, go be an accountant for a musician. Like you can still get into the music industry without having to be a famous singer or DJ or whatever. But I think, you know, a lack of that knowledge and just how big the world is and how big industries are and what we can do is, you know, a big part of why people feel like they can't do things, because they only see this, you know, one straight line of point A to point B of success, but it can go all over the place.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you've said that so well, because, you know, when it comes about creating a lifestyle and, you know, with the intent of this podcast is it's about furthering your lifestyle, right? And that doesn't mean, yes, you have to leave the 9 to 5, because if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But, you know, find a way that you can create it the way you want it, right? And you said it so well, you know, doing the accounting, but if you have a passion for music, but if you can't play an instrument, right, you're gonna feel like, okay, well, like, how can I even be in that industry? But you can be an accountant in the music industry and you'll be able to get the thrill, the ride, the excitement while doing that too. And I think that's really important, that we bring together our talents, our passions, our hobbies, our loves and dislikes, and, you know, bring them all together and see how you can leverage them and create something which is your unfair advantage. Because, you know, not everyone can do what everyone else does, but you can apply it in different ways. And you can be just like, oh yeah, I work in the music industry, and people are like, oh, well, what do you play? And it's like, well, no, actually I'm an accountant, but, you know, I get to meet all the cool guys just like any other musician would, right? So it's that lens and perspective. You've said it so well, because we only seem to know this one way because that's all we're taught or all we know. Whereas once you start to read or understand and take that knowledge in, or listen to people like yourself, we start to realize, like, hey, we've got this all the wrong way. So no, it's clear as day for me. And I hope the listeners, you can really take something from this, and it's encouraging to hear it. And what's exciting is, you know, once again, it does come across as cliche, but Emily's doing it. So you need to go follow her stuff and see what she's doing, because you'll start to realize, like, wow, how can she do this? Okay, so
I don't want it to seem like I know everything, because I do not. But I think something that I didn't say that I think needs to be said is it's about being open to all of these possibilities and opportunities. You know, I don't know all of the different types of jobs that you can get being an accounting major, but I can think to myself, well, I'm sure there are many things that you can do, you know, and just being open to whatever industry. Like, oh, if you have a passion for art, you can be creative within your job, the current job that you're in. You don't need to quit and start a new one. You don't need to move to Bali and go to a 10-day meditation retreat to figure out how you can be artsy. You can do it, you know, you just have to put in a little extra work. But if it's something that you love, you'll figure it out.
100%. It's people, take action. So I have some rapid fire questions for you, and we've covered so much. And like you said, you know, we could dive we could dive into so much. And but obviously, you know, we won't have all that time. So I encourage people to continue to follow you, and who knows, we might have you on again in the future. But some of the random questions that I had for you, and you can elaborate or you can just keep them short and sweet. It's entirely up to you. The first one is, what scares you the most?
Being in one place forever.
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
Like anytime I try to tell someone that I'm living somewhere, they're like, for how long? And if I try to say like, oh, I might be here for a while, they're like, yeah, right. Like my friends by now, they're like, where are you again? You have the same phone number? Are you sure?
Yeah, that's a fair point, and it's funny because I remember when we were planning for this podcast and whatnot, you said, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm going to be here." And it's like, "Oh, but in 2 weeks I'm going to be there." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like, for me, I'm thinking, okay, but which is 100% fine, and yeah, that's the honest answer. So thank you for sharing that. The next one would be, what advice would you give to someone who is at a crossroad of, treading their own path, or maybe wanting to make a change, or create a new lifestyle? What would be your
Ooh.
advice?
So one of the things that I do, and I think to myself, and sometimes I'll write it down, like when I was debating taking this accounting job or taking a gap year and going to Australia, I wrote down the pros and cons. And I thought to myself, what would I regret more? Would I regret not going to Australia, or would I regret not taking the job? I'm like, well, if I go to Australia and it doesn't work, I can go home and find another job. But I don't want to get the job and then regret never having gone to Australia like my friend did. So I think about it that way. It may not be the healthiest way to look at situations, but that's what I do.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great answer, and it relates to me very much so. And I think other people, sometimes it is those simplest ways of just pros and cons, right? And we realize, put it on paper, and we start to realize, it makes so much more sense because it's a lot of the time we're so confused in our heads. So no, I think that's a great answer. Favorite book you have read, or are reading, or want to share?
Ooh, one that I just read that's really great is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And like a self-help book. It, talks about how to be a better person to other people and how to be a better person to yourself. It's a super easy read. If you're not into reading, I highly recommend it. I also read his book, The Mastery of Love, like a year or so ago, but he's got some great wisdom in there, very easy reads. You can read it in a day or two, and it's just read a chapter before you go to bed. It's super relaxing and adds a little bit of positivity to your day.
Awesome. I'll put that in the show notes for anyone that wants to check that out as well. And I personally haven't read it, but I'll be checking it out 100%. And then the last rapid fire question is, it doesn't have to be three, but I've said three. What's your three favorite hobbies or things to do when you're resting or in your free time, which is a bit of a funny question because you do have a lot of free time. But I guess, when it comes to you and you just want to, chill, relax, or things that you would love to be able to do other than traveling, what are some of those things look like?
Um, so I really do enjoy cooking, and something that is very soothing for me is chopping vegetables. So I love food prep.
Is it the ASMR, like hearing the sound, or?
No, it's just like very okay. You know what it is? It's a form of mindfulness, just like yoga, just like running, because you have to be very present or you're going to chop your finger off.
Yeah, but
I can't be thinking about the 40 things I have to do this week. I have to be like, all right, this is how you cut a zucchini. So
no,
I think
it
that's
helps
why.
you slow down, I guess. It's once
Mhm.
again, it's a great perspective of it. Okay. Anything else?
Um, I mean, besides yoga, journaling is really important for me. I used to never do it because I'm like, oh, I don't keep a diet. Like, they call them like diaries. And I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that. And my roommate from college actually got me a travel journal right before I left for Europe. And I used it just to write down the places I went to, the people that I met, stuff like that. And then the second travel journal she gave me after graduation, when I went on my, crazy big adventure that I'm still on right now, that's when I started writing down more of how I was feeling. And sometimes I write down how I'm feeling, like good, bad. And then sometimes I make random lists of things that I need to do or goals for myself or just little happy thoughts like, oh, Emily, I'm proud of you for doing this, and talking to myself like that and just trying to keep it positive and, things that I may not want to say to family or friends, not because it's too private, but it's like, I can just write this down and get it out of my system. So I think it's very helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I mean, we all do it in different ways. And if you don't do it, I encourage just to, at the end of the day, just do some dot points and just get the things out of your head, right? And you said it really well around that, sometimes it is having that conversation with yourself, you're building some, lists of things that you need to do, but it just clears your head, right? It really does help. And I can appreciate that one.
I was just gonna quickly say something else that I do, not every day, but I do like to, I have I share subscriptions and I have my own to Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO Max, stuff like that. So, if I'm really feeling down or lazy, I will take the time to just watch something by myself or watch something with a friend, and that's okay. Like you were kind of saying earlier, it's okay to do nothing. It's not okay to do nothing for, 365 days in a row, but if you need to take the time for yourself, take it. You don't have to be journaling or meditating to be mindful and to give yourself, self-love or self-care. You can just be wearing comfy clothes and watching your favorite Netflix show, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's I totally agree. For me, I'm trying to play more video games this year because it makes me stop and step away. And I haven't finished one. Well, I've now have because I've been able to do one this year, but I set the goal for 3 this year because I realized I hadn't done one in like 10 years, which meant I hadn't actually stepped away from, just doing all these things. And it's the thing that I used to love doing so much. And it, slows me down, means I have to step away from everything else. So 100% relatable.
Do you want to know something I
Yeah.
found? So when I was like, oh my goodness, under 10 years old, I used to play the Harry Potter Chamber of Secrets EA games on my computer when I was a kid, right? And I don't know why, but there was one point during quarantine, I just kept thinking about it and I kept having dreams about the game. I don't know why. And I found it on eBay and I bought it and I re-downloaded it and I played it a couple months ago, and I played it nonstop for the first 3 days.
It's so good. It's so good. And that's the reality of it though, because obviously there was something there, like you're yearning for it and wanting that excitement or feeling. And, obviously because there's a lot of things going on as well. So to have that reconnection to something that you've bonded with, that's really cool. And thank you for sharing that.
It was so nostalgic. I'm like, I cannot believe I found this game and I can't believe I'm paying for it right now.
That's awesome. That's so good. And it really is. Well, there you go. There you go. I mean, we'll start to wrap it up. And I want to say thank you so much because we have covered so much in here. And, you've got a big bag of gems that I think that we probably haven't even tapped into. We've only really touched the tip of the iceberg. But I want to say a big thank you for, jumping on and sharing a bit about yourself and your journey and, the different things that you're working through and how you're living your lifestyle, because I think it's really encouraging. And I hope the listeners have been able to take something away from this, whether it's just to be inspired or to take action or, to maybe, further their own lifestyle. So I really want to say a big thanks. But I want to also give you the chance that if you've got, if there's one thing that you would love to leave with the listeners, whether it can be a quote or if it's one thing that they take away, is there anything you would like to say like that?
I guess the biggest thing, and I say it to my friends and they say it back to me, it's kind of a daily reminder, is to take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
So prioritize yourself. You're number one. That's super important.
Yeah. And it's deep as well, right? We can look at it surface level, we can look at it deep, and I think it's important and we can all hear it and take away from that. So thank you so much. Now, the other thing is, where can people follow you? If people, been really intrigued and want to know a bit more about you, what's the best way for people to stay up to date or to follow along?
You can follow me on my the Yogi account. It's just M_the_Yogi. So I haven't been posting there lately because I've been busy, but you can look at some of my travels on there. Shoot me a message if you have any questions. Happy to help. And thank you for having me. Excited to listen to your other future podcasts. And I'm sure they're super inspiring to your listeners.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's been a total honor to have you. And like I said, when we you were actually probably the first person that, or maybe one other two people that were working with me at the time, but that actually got to meet my face before the rest of everyone else did. And that was back in, January. So it's been a long time coming, and it's well deserved because, you really have been a very perfect example of that lifestyle and everything that I want the brand and the podcast to really promote and encourage. And you're that living example. So thank you, because you took the action first to be able to create that. And you inspired me, and it's been a very encouraging journey. And I hope now that it continues to encourage other people and people can learn. So people reach out to Emily, because, she's got so much wisdom and gems in this area. And I mean, she's only just getting started. I'm sure of that. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for listening, everyone.
All right, so there you go, guys. That was an absolute pleasure to have Emily here on the podcast, and I've enjoyed this episode, being able to chat to her and just have the conversation about life and the different things that I guess are thrown at us through all that happens in life, and COVID being one of them. But there's so much more to that, and I feel like what I've taken away from this episode is that we can be doing so many different things, and there's that huge big push to be doing more and to be pushing forwards and to be growing. And sometimes our growth and our ability to grow can come from the smallest things. And I loved how she touched on about, just at the moment, it's just been great to be able to slow down and just focus on cutting vegetables and really taking the time to just relax, calm down. And sometimes we need to find a new and different and unique way to find this. And that was probably one of the key takeaways for me. I'm inspired by Emily just by everything that she's doing and that she has done. And if there's anything that I would like you to take away from this is think about how you can create something that you are passionate about as much as she is passionate about what she's doing and living her life. And the amount of freedom that she brings and just the smile and happiness that comes with that, I think it's quite contagious. And when I first met Emily back in early 2020, we had coffee together, and to actually see her in person and what she's all about, it's just as powerful of what you've just heard today. So it was an absolute honor and pleasure to have you, Emily. So thank you once again. Now, I do encourage everyone to go check out the show notes. We touched on a few different things here. Of course, check out the book that she recommended too. Go check out our socials. Go check out what she's all about, because, she's just getting started. It's early days for what she wants to do, and I'm excited to follow along for her journey and where she travels to next. It might not be another country at this point for a while, but I know she'll be doing plenty of different things. And of course, if you're keen to get into some yoga, she's your girl. She can help you and point you in the right direction. So it's been an absolute honor having her on the show, and it's been an absolute pleasure being able to have that conversation, not just with her, but with you all listening as well. So I really do appreciate you all being here. My name's Chris Furlong. I am the host of the Further Your Lifestyle podcast, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day.